Hello students and welcome to part 2. Let's look at one more example of how to find slope using the slope formula in a table. I want you to pay close attention to this example because this is where students often make a mistake because this is a special type of slope. Now, based on what you've learned so far about relations and functions, if you look at this table, you can see that it is not a function. Every input is the same and yields a different output, and therefore one input has more than one output, so it does not meet the requirements for a function. Therefore, it can't be a linear function, and therefore it can't have slope. This is a table of a vertical line that would have an undefined slope. Now, let's pretend that you didn't see that, or maybe that you were given two ordered pairs, such as these two, and didn't notice that the same input yielded more than one output. You can still use the slope formula. Label them x1, y1 and x2, y2. Substitute them into the slope formula. y1 is 0 minus y2, which is 1, over x1, which is 2, minus x2, which is 2. So we get 0 minus 1 is negative 1 over 2 minus 2, which is 0. Anytime that you have divide by 0, you know that it is an undefined slope. You cannot take a number and divide it 0 ways. That's undefined. Now, common mistake is that students will do 0 divided by negative 1 and think that it has a 0 slope. Make sure that you read it numerator to denominator. Negative 1 divided by 0 is undefined because you cannot divide by 0. Now, let's look at how you could still use the slope formula with an equation. Now, look at the equation. Do you see 2 points? And the answer is no. This is an equation that can be used to create any 2 points. Now, you could substitute a value in for x and get a value for y twice, but let's review a way that we learned to get 2 points, and that is to use the intercepts. So we can figure out the x-intercept and the y-intercept, and then use those 2 points to figure out the slope. So for our x-intercept, we know that y equals 0, so we're going to substitute 0 for y. So here's our equation. 2y is equal to 12 minus 3x. We're going to substitute 0 for y, so we have 2 times 0 equals 12 minus 3x. 2 times 0 is 0, but I need to put the 0 there since that's the only number on the left side of the equal sign. So we have 0 equals 12 minus 3x. Now, this is a two-step equation because there's two operations acting on x. I'll first eliminate the constant. Take away 12 from each side, so I get negative 12 equals negative 3x. Divide by negative 3, divide by negative 3. Negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1, or 1x, so I get x equals 4. Now, I know that the x-intercept is equal to the point 4, 0. Now I have 1 point in this relationship, half of what I need to know in order to use the slope formula. Now, I'll find the y-intercept. For the y-intercept, we know that x is 0, so I'll take my equation and I will substitute 0 for x in order to find the y-intercept. So I have 2y equals 12 minus 3 times 0. Minus 3 times 0 is 0, so I have 2y equals 12. One-step equation, divide each side by 2, I get y equals 6. So that means that the y-intercept is the point 0, 6. Now that I know 2 points that are in this relationship, I can use the slope formula. Remember, first step, label the points, x1, y1, x2, y2. Substitute into the slope formula, which says y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. y1 was 0, minus y2, which is 6, over x1, which is 4, minus x2, which is 0. So we get 0 minus 6, which is negative 6, over 4 minus 0, which is 4. Negative divided positive is a negative. 6 cannot divide by 4 to get a whole number, so instead we'll reduce it. 6 and 4 can both reduce by 2 to get negative 3 halves. So the slope of this relationship is negative 3 over 2. Again, please do not change this to a decimal, and you'll see why in the next lesson. Leave it as a reduced fraction. Now, let's look at one more way to use the slope formula, and that is if you have a graph. Now, in my opinion, most of the time, using a graph is easiest to find the slope if you use rise over run. So we're going up 10 and over 20. But if you don't like rise over run, if you have difficulty counting lines, then you can use the ordered pairs. Here is one point on the graph, and this is the point 30, comma 10, because here's the x value, here's the y value. Just make sure you put them in the right order. And here is our other point, 50, comma 20. So label our points x1, y1, and x2, y2. Substitute them into the slope formula, which says y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. y1 is 10 minus y2 is 20 over x1, which is 30, minus x2, which is 50. 10 minus 20 is negative 10, and 30 minus 50 is negative 20. Negative divided negative is a positive. 10 will not divide by 20 to get a whole number because this is a fraction. The numerator is smaller than the denominator, so we need to reduce it by 10. 10 divided by 10 is 1, and 20 divided by 10 is 2. So we get positive 1/2 as our slope. Now, let's talk about what this slope means in context of the problem. It's positive, so that means up and to the right, or both increasing together. So as the height, or as the days increase by 2, the height increases by 1. Because remember, the numerator is the change in y, which is the change in the height in this case. So 1 height, 2 time, or 2 days. Now put it into a sentence. Each time 2 days passes, the height increases by 1. That's what the slope represents in context to this graph that's about plant growth and relates the height, how the height depends on the time. So if we were to write a sentence, we would say each time 2 days passes, the plant grows 1 centimeter. Always understanding that it's the change in the dependent variable, the y's, that's on the y-axis, so 1 represents height, over the change in x, which is on the x-axis, so 2 is representing time in days. So let's summarize what we've learned. We've learned that the slope is a comparison of the change in the dependent variable to the change in the independent variable. We've also learned that the slope formula says that we can subtract the change in y over subtract the change in x. In other words, it looks like this algebraically. If you have 2 points, x1, y1, and x2, y2, then slope is equal to y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. Now, we also learned about two special slopes, so we have to be careful when we see these because we want to make sure we don't confuse the two of them. If the slope formula comes out to 0 over a number, 0 divided by some number, then the slope is 0. But if the reverse occurs, if the slope formula comes out to a number over 0, then the slope is undefined. In other words, 0 over a number, 0 divided by something is always 0. But a number divided by 0 cannot occur, so that's undefined because it's a vertical line.